A frantic phone call from a husband on a business trip, a mother-in-law's sudden illness, a wife cast out into the night. It sounds like the start of a simple domestic dispute. But when Sarah, a quiet bookkeeper, is coldly ordered out of her own home by her husband, Ethan, she has no idea she is a pawn in a terrifying game of desperation and deceit. Days later, sneaking back to her house at 2 a.m. to retrieve crucial documents, Sarah stumbles upon a horrifying scene in her living room, a scene that unravels a conspiracy of lies so dark it threatens to destroy them all. What really happened in the days Sarah was gone? The full story is a chilling journey into the dark heart of a seemingly normal family. The shrill ring of the phone sliced through the oppressive silence of the small bungalow in Queens. Sarah groggily reached across the nightstand, her mind still foggy after a grueling late night closing the quarterly books for the custom cabinetry workshop where she worked. The screen flashed her husband's name. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. Calls this late from Ethan rarely brought good news. She answered, her voice thick with sleep and irritation. "Hello, I'm listening. Pack your things and get out of the house. Now." Ethan's voice was sharp and cold, laced with static from a poor connection. Sarah frowned, the last remnants of sleep vanishing instantly, replaced by a surge of bitter anger. "What are you rambling about? It's the middle of the night. I just fell asleep. You're supposed to be in Newark. It doesn't matter where I am. My mother is sick. She needs to rest. She says just looking at your miserable face makes her sicker, that she can't breathe when you're around. If she's sick, take her to the doctor. I work all day and get home late. We barely see each other. How can you blame me? This is ridiculous. Are you arguing with me? I'm out of town on business and can't deal with you. Get your stuff and find somewhere else to crash. Get out. Rent a room so my mother can have some peace. Don't let me come home and find you still hanging around, making a scene. Ethan, you watch your mouth. This is our house too. Where am I supposed to go at this hour? You cleared out our joint account for your trip. What am I supposed to use for money to rent a room at 2 a.m? That's your problem. You're a bookkeeper at that workshop. You've got access to the owner's cash. Figure it out. I'm not saying it again. Get out, so my mother doesn't have to see you." Ethan hung up abruptly, giving her no chance to respond. Sarah threw the phone onto the mattress and stared at the water-stained ceiling. 32 years old, married for 6 years. The pointless fights and Ethan's absurd excuses for kicking her out had become a sickeningly repetitive script. Her mother-in-law, Sharon, had never liked her. She complained that Sarah was rough around the edges, always buried in sawdust and ledgers, not polished and sweet-tongued like the women who worked in air-conditioned offices. Normally, a person would scream, would pound on doors, and demand an explanation. But Sarah was exhausted. The physical depletion from a week of racing to meet the tax deadline seemed to have eroded any will to fight back. "Fine, whatever you want," she muttered. "I can't breathe in this house either. I'm leaving." Sarah swung her legs out of bed and opened the cheap particle board wardrobe. She pulled out an old, striped duffel bag. Without hesitation, without a single tear, she grabbed a few work uniforms and some underwear, stuffed them inside, and zipped the bag shut. She walked out of the bedroom. Sharon was asleep on the pull-out sofa in the living room, her snores rattling the thin walls. Sarah glanced at her mother-in-law's satisfied expression and thought, "Sick and needs rest? More like an excuse to get rid of me." Sarah quietly wheeled her old sedan out of the driveway, carefully closing the gate to avoid making a sound. The late-night Queens air was cool and damp, and a shiver ran through her as the wind cut through her thin jacket. The streets were deserted at this hour, save for a few food cart vendors washing their equipment under the yellow glow of the streetlights. Sarah sighed, turned the key, and drove straight to the cabinetry workshop. When she arrived, the main gate was locked. Sarah banged on the steel door, calling out for the elderly security guard. "Mr. Henderson, it's me. Can you open up?" The old man shuffled to the gate, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark and landing on Sarah's face. His voice was a sleepy rumble. "Good Lord, Sarah, what are you doing out here at this hour? Got into it with the husband again. Did he kick you out?" "Something like that. Can you let me in?" I just need to crash in the storage area for the night. I'll explain in the morning. Mr. Henderson grumbled under his breath as he unlocked the gate. Sarah parked her car and walked silently past the hulking, silent table saws and routers. She found the light switch for the storage area, illuminating stacks of finished plywood. She grabbed a dusty old blanket the workers used for their lunch breaks, spread it over a pile of smooth birch veneer, and used her duffel bag as a pillow. The air was thick with the scent of sawdust, which settled on her skin like a fine, gritty powder. Sarah closed her eyes and told herself to just sleep. Tomorrow, she would figure it out. Life had taught her that if you just gritted your teeth and endured, you could get used to anything. The cold from the wood seeped through her clothes, making sleep impossible. She tossed and turned, her bones aching. Just before 2 a.m., she shot upright, a jolt of panic coursing through her. The tax receipts. Tomorrow was the final deadline to submit the quarterly tax filings. A folder of critical receipts, documenting hundreds of thousands of dollars in material purchases for the workshop, was sitting in a blue plastic file holder on top of the refrigerator back at home. Yesterday evening, while she was making dinner, Sharon had been nagging her about clutter. Annoyed, Sarah had tossed the file onto the fridge, planning to put it in her work bag after eating. Then the argument had started. Then she had gone to bed, exhausted. Then came Ethan's phone call. "Oh no, I completely forgot the folder." Sarah smacked her forehead. If the workshop didn't have those receipts tomorrow, the late fees and the risk of a full-blown IRS audit would be catastrophic. Her boss might even fire her. Scrambling into her shoes, Sarah grabbed her keys. She had to go back. Sharon would be dead asleep. If she was quiet, she could slip in, grab the folder from the kitchen, and leave without anyone knowing. She found Mr. Henderson at the gate again. "Mr. Henderson, I'm so sorry, but I left something important at home. Can you open up for me? I'll be right back. This time of night, you be careful out there, girl. Streets are empty. Perfect for muggers," the old man mumbled as he pulled the heavy gate open. Her car rumbled back to life, retracing its path through the sleeping borough. The side street was pitch black. Sarah killed the engine at the corner and coasted the rest of the way, stopping silently in front of her house to avoid waking the neighbors' dogs. She reached through the bars of the gate to unlock the padlock. Her fingers met empty, cold air. The padlock was gone. Sarah froze. "That's weird," she whispered to herself. "I locked it myself when I left. Who would have taken it off?" The gate had been bolted from the inside. Not only that, but the storm door was also pulled shut and latched, something they never did. Normally, they just locked the outer gate at night, leaving the inner door slightly ajar for ventilation. A woman's intuition, sharpened by years of living with emotional abuse, kicked in. Something was very wrong. If Ethan was in Newark, and Sharon was a sick, elderly woman alone in the house, why would it be barricaded like a fortress? Her mother-in-law was old, with failing eyesight. There was no way she could have gone outside, removed the heavy padlock, and then bolted the gate from within by herself in the middle of the night. Sarah stepped back, squinting up at the second-floor windows. Total darkness. She parked the car against the curb, then slipped down the narrow alley between her house and the neighbors. At the back of their small property was a low, crumbling brick wall, barely chest-high, a remnant from an old property line. She gathered a few loose bricks and stacked them into a makeshift step. Gritting her teeth against the slippery moss, she pulled herself up and over the wall, scraping her hands on the rough concrete. She landed with a hard thud on the small concrete patio behind the kitchen, her knee slamming into the uneven ground. She bit her lip to stifle a cry of pain. She looked up at the small, high window of the downstairs bathroom. It had no bars, just a small, square opening for an exhaust fan. Sarah grabbed an old paint bucket Sharon used for gardening, flipped it upside down, and climbed on. Peering into the darkness, she was hit with the damp, cloying smell of soap scum. With a grim determination born of instinct, she braced her hands on the sill, squeezed her shoulders through the opening, and wriggled inside. Her shirt snagged on a screw from the fan, tearing a long gash down the side. She dropped onto the slick tile floor of the bathroom. Before she could even get to her feet, a strange sound from the living room reached her ears, freezing her in place. It was a choked, guttural moan, punctuated and desperate, like someone gasping for air. It was not Sharon's voice. This was the sound of pure, unadulterated agony, a sound that clawed at the midnight silence. Sarah's legs went weak, her heart hammering against her ribs. Cold sweat soaked her shirt. She crept to the bathroom door and pushed it open just a crack. Her gaze swept past the dark kitchen and into the living room. In the dim light filtering through the blinds, she saw a sight that made her blood run cold. On the tiled floor, a dark shape was writhing. It would convulse, twisting in spasms, letting out those terrifying moans. As her eyes adjusted, the shape took on a human form. It was a strange woman. Her hair was a tangled mess, obscuring her face. She wore a thin, torn nightgown. Her exposed arms and legs were covered in deep, ugly bruises, some so dark they were almost black. In other places, the skin was broken and bleeding, smearing the floor. She was clutching her swollen belly, rolling back and forth in torment. Sarah held her breath, pressing herself against the kitchen doorframe. Suddenly, heavy footsteps pounded from the upstairs bedroom. Ethan emerged. Her husband, the man who, less than 2 hours ago, claimed to be miles away in Newark, was standing right there. His face was ashen. He was wearing nothing but a pair of boxer shorts, and in his hands he carried a metal basin of steaming water that reeked of antiseptic. Trailing behind him was Sharon, her mother-in-law, looking anything but sick. Her face was a mask of fear, and she was muttering prayers under her breath as if warding off a demon. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the moaning woman. "Mom, wring out the damn towel. Don't just stand there. Look at all this blood. We have to get it to stop," he hissed, his voice a desperate whisper. He snatched the towel from Sharon's hand and clumsily began dabbing at the wounds on the strange woman's thigh. Sharon's teeth were chattering. She collapsed onto the corner of the sofa. "Oh my God, Ethan, maybe we should call an ambulance. Look at her, she can barely breathe. If she dies here, the police will take us all away. This old body can't handle that. The house was so peaceful, why did you have to bring this curse here?" Ethan shot a venomous look at his mother. "Are you insane? Call an ambulance?" Her crew, those loan shark scumbags, they're probably watching every hospital in the city. Taking her there is like hand-delivering her to them. They'll kill us all. Now shut up before the neighbors hear you and call the cops themselves." The injured woman reached out a frail hand and grabbed Ethan's wrist, her nails digging into his skin. "Ethan, please, help me. My stomach. It hurts so much. They kicked me in the stomach. My baby. Is my baby okay?" "Stay still. Don't move," Ethan stammered, pressing her shoulders down. "It's okay. It's just soft tissue damage. I've hidden you here. They won't find you for now. Just be quiet. Stop crying." From her hiding spot, Sarah watched, her mouth agape. It was all a perfectly executed plan to get her out of the way. Ethan had secretly brought this pregnant woman, who was being hunted by loan sharks, into their home. Piecing together their frantic whispers, Sarah understood. This woman was in deep with criminals, beaten half to death by debt collectors, and her husband was risking everything prison, or being butchered by gangsters to protect her. But why? Why would a selfish coward like Ethan take such a risk? And why would the perpetually critical Sharon agree to let her son harbor a stranger in their house? The blue file folder on top of the refrigerator no longer mattered. A colossal, dark secret had just unfurled before her, and Sarah knew, with chilling certainty, that she was going to be the one to tear it all down. Ethan snatched the blood-soaked towel and threw it back into the metal basin. He glared at Sharon, who was still huddled on the sofa. "Mom!" "Ring it out," I said. He was trying to keep his voice down, but the raw panic made it sharp and ragged. Sharon flinched, her hands trembling as she picked up the viscous, heavy cloth. A pinkish liquid dripped through her fingers onto the coffee table. Good God, all this blood. "Ethan, son, let's just call 911. If she dies here, the cops will arrest all of us. Why did you bring this trouble home? Ethan's face contorted with fury. I told you to shut up. Call 911? Manny's crew is crawling all over this city. Taking her to a hospital is a death sentence for all of us. They'll find her, and then they'll find us. He grabbed the towel again and pressed it hard against a deep gash on the woman's leg. She arched her back, a scream tearing from her throat, her hands clawing at the air. I told you to be still, Ethan snarled, pinning her down. The more you move, the more you'll bleed. This is the safest place for you. They'll never think to look for you in a quiet neighborhood in Queens. Just take the pain. I'll go to a 2-4-hour pharmacy and get some heavy-duty antibiotics in the morning. The woman's voice was a broken whisper. There were so many of them, Ethan. They had knives. They were going to tear up my apartment. I don't have the money for the daily interest payments anymore. What if they find me here? My baby? Shut your mouth, Ethan hissed, clamping a hand over her mouth. The neighbors will hear. I've handled it. I got rid of my wife for a while. No one will come to this house. Just lie still and recover. I'll take care of everything. From the shadows, Sarah bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. The metallic tang helped her stay upright. Every word spoken was a shard of glass piercing her chest. So, that was it. The woman was a gambler, hunted by loan sharks. And Ethan, her husband who always preached about propriety and looked down on her blue-collar job, was risking his life to hide a criminal. He had willingly invited this danger into their home, gambling their lives in a deadly game of hide-and-seek with ruthless thugs. The Ethan she was seeing now was more cruel and calculating than she had ever imagined. The whole performance, the late-night call, the fake story about his sick mother, it was all a charade to clear the stage for this woman. Sharon started her whining again, slapping her thighs in agitation. You're going to ruin me, Ethan. If those gangsters show up here, throwing paint, throwing bricks, I'll never be able to show my face in this neighborhood again. And what if Sarah comes back and finds out? She'll scream the house down. It will be a disgrace. Mom, stop it, Ethan snapped, standing up. Sarah's an idiot. You tell her to go. She goes. Tomorrow, you scrub this whole mess clean. Use bleach. Get rid of the blood smell. And keep that storeroom locked. If she comes back for her things, just tell her we're fumigating for roaches, and she can't come in. We're in too deep now. Throwing her out on the street would ruin the whole plan. Plan? What plan? Sarah wondered. A coward like Ethan, who would cross the street to avoid a simple argument, was now risking his life to hide a pregnant debtor. There had to be something more to it, a secret far more terrible than a simple affair. What was Ethan planning to do with the child in that woman's belly? Sarah knew she couldn't stay. Her legs were cramping from holding the same position for so long. To be discovered now would be suicide. In their panicked state, there was no telling what Ethan might do. Slowly, silently, she backed away into the bathroom, her eyes still fixed on the scene in the living room. The woman's moans faded, replaced by Ethan's frustrated muttering and Sharon's heavy sighs. This dark curtain, Sarah vowed, she would tear it down herself. But not tonight. She climbed back onto the paint bucket, squeezed through the narrow window, and dropped onto the dark patch of grass behind the house, twisting her ankle as she landed. Ignoring the searing pain, she scrambled to her feet, grabbed her duffel bag, and ran for the alley. Her car was still there, a silent shadow by the curb. She got in, started the engine, and sped away, the wind whipping through the torn fabric of her shirt, a cold that chilled her to the bone. She drove straight back to the workshop and let herself in through a side gate. She didn't bother the security guard. Back in the storage area, she collapsed onto the dusty blanket. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She stared into the darkness, but she did not cry. Any other wife, upon discovering such a monstrous betrayal, would have been shattered. But for Sarah, the shock had burned away the grief, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. The years of sacrifice, of putting up with her mother-in-law's scorn to keep the peace, it was all for nothing. They saw her as a fool, an obstacle to be kicked aside for their dark schemes. The first order of business was not to cause a scene. It was to protect herself. She needed to check their finances. Every month, her salary and the extra cash she made from freelance bookkeeping were deposited into a joint account managed by Ethan. He had always insisted it was for their future, for a down payment on a bigger house. She had trusted him. Around 8 a.m., as she was trying to focus on the receipts she'd come back for, her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. She let it ring 3 times before answering, her voice deliberately groggy. "Hello? Where are you?" Ethan's voice was a performance of concerned husband calling from his business trip. "At the workshop. Where else? After you kicked me out. It was either a pile of plywood or a park bench." "Look, don't be like that. I was stressed last night, and Mom was sick. Have you found a place to stay? Maybe you can crash with your friend Lisa for a few days." "I'm swamped with work here in Newark. I'll be back at the end of the week to sort things out." "You do your work. Don't worry about me," Sarah said, playing along. "I told my boss what happened, and he's letting me stay in an old supply closet. I'm working overtime all week anyway, so it's fine. Just make sure Mom is okay. I'm not coming back there anytime soon. I don't want her getting worked up because of me." Ethan let out an audible sigh of relief. "Okay, good. You just stay there and work. Don't come back and disturb my mother. I'll call you later." He hung up quickly. Sarah tossed the phone on her desk. He was a terrible actor. She immediately opened her laptop. While the joint bank account was in Ethan's name, she had, months ago, linked it to a personal finance app on her computer to track their spending without his knowledge. She pulled up the transaction history for the last 6 months. Her blood ran cold. For the first 3 months, everything was normal. But then, large withdrawals began appearing, $20,000 or $30,000 at a time, always transferred in the dead of night, while he was lying next to her, pretending to be asleep. She clicked on a $50,000 transfer from the previous month. The memo line contained only 2 initials. 6 years of savings, her sweat and her sleepless nights, all gone. The account balance was less than $3,000. Over $60,000 had vanished. Sarah felt a wave of nausea. He was using her money to support that woman. She needed to know the full name of the account holder. The app only showed initials. She called her best friend, Lisa, who worked as a teller at the bank branch where they had the account. "Lisa, can you do me a huge favor?" 5 minutes later, Lisa called back. "Sarah, are you and Ethan doing business with someone named Jenna Miller? I see dozens of transfers from your joint account to an account at a different bank under that name. The most recent one was for $2,000, sent at 3 a.m. this morning." Jenna, a name she had never heard before. $2,000 at 3 a.m. It lined up perfectly with the time Ethan would have been frantically trying to get medicine for the woman on their living room floor. Jenna Miller. The pregnant woman, the one hunted by loan sharks, the one Ethan was bankrupting them to save. The horrifying secret was beginning to take shape. This game, Sarah thought, a cold fury solidifying in her heart. Ethan may have started it, but she was going to be the one to finish it. The betrayal was so profound it felt like a physical blow. The family she had worked so hard to build was nothing but a rotten facade. Ethan had dragged a wanted criminal into their home, using Sarah's own money to care for her. The rage was a bitter pill in her throat, but Sarah swallowed it down. Crying was useless. Just as she was plotting her next move, the door to her office burst open. "Where is she? Enjoying the air conditioning while your mother-in-law suffers?" It was Cheryl, Ethan's older sister. She worked a small stall at a flea market and was constantly hitting them up for money. She barged in, threw her purse on a stack of invoices, and sat down. "I called you. I texted you. What kind of daughter-in-law are you? Your mother is sick at home, and you run off to sleep on a pile of wood. Ethan is worried sick." Sarah gave her a dead-eyed stare. "What do you want, Cheryl?" "I'm busy. My old minivan finally died on me yesterday," Cheryl said, getting straight to the point. "I was at the dealership this morning looking at a nice used SUV. I need $5,000 for the down payment. Get it for me." Sarah almost laughed at the audacity. $5,000. as if it were pocket change. In the past, to keep the peace, she would have given her 100 or two. Not today. I don't have any money, Sarah said flatly. Cheryl's eyes widened in disbelief. What do you mean you don't have money? You're the head bookkeeper here. Don't be so cheap. I'm asking for a loan, not a handout. And I'm telling you again, I don't have it. I gave all our savings to Ethan for a business investment. If you want a new car, call your brother. I'm just a wage earner with my own debts to worry about. Cheryl slammed her hand on the desk, her face turning purple with rage. You think because you make a little money you can disrespect this family? Let me tell you something. Ethan, not throwing you out on the street for abandoning his sick mother, is a blessing. I'm going to go home and tell her what a horrible person you are. Go ahead, Sarah said, standing up, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. Tell her. And while you're at it, ask your precious brother what, or who, he's hiding in that house. Now get out of my office before I have security throw you out. Cheryl was so taken aback by Sarah's ferocity that she was speechless. She grabbed her purse and scurried out the door, muttering curses under her breath. The door closed, and Sarah sank into her chair. They had bled her dry for long enough. It was time to find out exactly who Jenna Miller was. That afternoon, Sarah took a half-day off. Using the bank information Lisa had given her, she searched social media. A profile popped up under the name Jenna M., with a profile picture of a young woman in a tight-fitting beer promo uniform, posing at a crowded sports bar. The sign in the background was clear. The Final Whistle Sports Grill, Astoria. It took her nearly an hour to drive through Queens traffic and find the place. It was only 4 p.m., so the bar was mostly empty. A middle-aged woman with a thick gold chain and a world-weary expression was sitting at the bar, scrolling on her phone. She was clearly the owner. Sarah ordered a soda. "Excuse me," she began, trying to sound casual. "I'm looking for a friend of mine, Jenna. She works here as a promo girl. I'm a relative from out of town, and her mom sent me with something for her, but her phone is off." The owner's face soured at the mention of Jenna. "Relative, huh? Well, if you find her, you can tell her she owes me $500 she took as an advance last week. She's been gone for 5 days. Phone's disconnected. What happened? Did she quit? Quit? That girl got herself into a world of trouble," the owner said, leaning closer, eager to gossip. "She was a good earner, but she had a bad gambling problem. Online poker, sports betting, you name it. Got herself pregnant a few months back and didn't even slow down." Sarah's hands tightened around her soda bottle. "Did she owe a lot of money?" "She was in over her head with some real nasty loan sharks," the owner said, lowering her voice. "The head guy, Manny, runs his crew out of the industrial park. We're talking tens of thousands. Last week, a couple of his thugs came in here looking for her, waving knives around, threatening to smash the place up if I was hiding her. I told her to get lost and never come back. If Manny's crew finds her, they'll beat that baby right out of her." Sarah felt a chill. A desperate gambling addict, pregnant, and on the run from violent criminals, and Ethan, her straight-laced, morally superior husband, had not only paid off her debts but brought her into their home. He had to have a motive far more terrifying than a simple affair. On the drive back, the setting sun painted the sky a bloody red. The picture was now horrifyingly clear. Jenna was a liability, a ticking time bomb, and Ethan had brought that bomb into their home and lit the fuse. It was time, Sarah decided, to go back to that hellhole in Queens and see the final act of their play. 5 days after she had left, Sarah pulled up to the house. She unlocked the gate and walked in. The air inside was thick, with a nauseating mix of herbal remedies, rubbing alcohol, and the cloying scent of cheap, lemon-scented cleaner. Sharon, hearing the door, scurried out from the kitchen. When she saw Sarah standing in the living room, the color drained from her face. "Oh, you're back. Why didn't you call?" "Ethan said you weren't coming until the weekend." Her voice trembled, and she instinctively positioned her body to block the hallway leading to the back of the house and the small storeroom under the stairs. The workshop project finished early. Sarah said calmly, placing her duffel bag on the floor. "This is my house. I came back to get some clean clothes. How are you feeling?" "The house smells like a hospital." Sharon forced a weak smile. "Oh, much better. We had a bit of a rat problem, so I had to spray insecticide everywhere. The storeroom back there got the worst of it. I have it sealed off. Don't go back there. The fumes are toxic." Sarah had to admire the clumsy lie. She walked towards the hallway, her eyes fixed on the storeroom door. The old knob was gone, replaced by a heavy-duty hasp and a brand-new, oversized brass padlock. Ethan was taking no chances. As Sarah was pretending to tidy up, a faint, muffled cough came from behind the locked door, followed by a soft whimper. Sharon jumped, dropping the TV remote. She immediately started coughing loudly herself, pounding her chest. "This draft is killing me. Sarah, could you run to the corner store and get me some cough drops? My throat is on fire." "Of course," Sarah said, a cold smile touching her lips. "You just sit here and rest, Mom. Don't want you overexerting yourself." She walked out the door. The game was afoot. They wanted to act, she would give them a stage. That night, she would give Ethan and Sharon a taste of what it felt like to be sitting on a powder keg. That evening, a storm was brewing. Sarah returned not with cough drops, but with 2 large bags from a popular local barbecue joint, the aroma of smoked brisket and spicy sauce filling the tense air. "I got a bonus at work," she announced cheerfully. "I figured we should celebrate. Mom, you've been sick. You need to eat something other than soup." Sharon hesitated, her eyes darting nervously towards the locked storeroom. But Sarah was already setting the table, her cheerful demeanor a stark command. Reluctantly, Sharon sat down. Sarah served her a heaping plate, then began to speak in a casual, chatty tone. "You know, the strangest thing happened while I was waiting for the food. I was reading the news on my phone, and there was this story about an old woman, right here in Queens. She took in this fugitive who was on the run from the mob, hid him in her basement for weeks." Sharon's fork clattered against her plate. "Really? What happened?" "What do you think happened?" Sarah said, taking a large bite of cornbread. "The mob found out. They sent a dozen guys with baseball bats. They broke down the door, dragged the guy out, and beat him to death in the street. And the old woman? They arrested her for harboring a criminal. The police seized her house. Her kids could only stand outside and cry. Imagine, ending up in jail at her age. What a disgrace for her family." A loud clap of thunder rattled the windows. Sharon dropped her fork, her face pale as a ghost. The barbecue sauce on her plate suddenly looked like blood. Just then, the front door opened, and Ethan walked in, soaked from the sudden downpour. When he saw Sarah sitting at the table, he froze, his eyes wide with shock. What are you doing here? I thought you were staying at the workshop." "My work finished early, so I came home." "This is my home, isn't it?" "And you said you'd be in Newark for 10 days. What happened? Did your big deal fall through?" Ethan stammered, avoiding her gaze. "Project got delayed. I had to come back." He quickly grabbed Sharon by the arm. "Mom, let's go out on the porch for a minute. I need to talk to you about some family stuff." He dragged her outside, pulling the storm door almost completely shut. Sarah smiled grimly. She took out her phone, started a voice recording, and crept to the door, pressing the phone against the narrow opening. Through the sound of the rain, she could hear their frantic whispers. "Why did you let her come back? Did Jenna make any noise? I didn't know she was coming. She just showed up. And she was telling this awful story about the mob and the police. I think she knows something. Jenna's been feverish all day, moaning in there. I don't know what to do. Just stay calm. Sarah's a simpleton. She doesn't know anything. Tonight, after she's asleep, I'll sneak more antibiotics into Jenna. Just keep her away from the back of the house. Once Jenna has the baby and is back on her feet, we can move forward with the plan." Sarah stopped the recording, a triumphant, cold smile on her face. The evidence was in her hand. They thought she was a fool. They had no idea the storm was about to break right over their heads. 3 days later, the loan sharks came. It was midday. 4 men on loud motorcycles pulled up, and with a crash, a brick sailed over the fence and smashed against the front door. "Jenna, you in there?" a gravelly voice roared. "You got our money? Come on out before we tear this whole damn neighborhood apart." The sound of a metal pipe banging against a lamppost echoed down the street. Sharon ran up from the kitchen, saw the smashed door, and collapsed, wailing. Ethan, who had been playing a game on his phone, leaped up, his face a mask of pure terror. He scrambled to the door, not to confront them, but to frantically try and slide the deadbolt into place, his hands shaking too much to manage it. The men outside hurled a plastic bag filled with red paint and rotting fish guts against the house, the stench instantly filling the air. Then, with a final volley of curses, they roared away. The house fell silent, save for the hum of the ceiling fan and the sickening smell. Ethan leaned against the door, panting, drenched in sweat. He turned and saw Sarah standing in the middle of the room, watching him with an unnervingly calm expression. His fear turned to rage. "What did you do?" he screamed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "Who did you piss off to have gangsters show up at our house? It's that filthy workshop of yours, isn't it? You got mixed up with some lowlifes, and now you've brought this mess to my doorstep. You want to get us all killed?" Sharon, recovering, joined the chorus. "My God, she's brought the criminal element to our home. This woman will be the death of us." Sarah looked at the pathetic, blustering man and the hysterical woman, and she felt nothing but contempt. She walked calmly towards them. "Are you sure they were here for me, Ethan?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Weren't you listening?" They were screaming a name. "Jenna. Is there someone named Jenna in this house? Or is it the filth you've got locked away under the stairs that's starting to stink up the whole neighborhood?" Ethan's jaw dropped. He was speechless. Just then, a terrified scream came from the locked storeroom. The game was over. At that exact moment, the front door, already damaged, was kicked open with a tremendous crash. A young man stood there, breathing heavily, his face a mask of fury. It was Jake, Sarah's younger brother. He had just arrived from North Carolina for a surprise visit, and had walked up to find the house vandalized and his sister being screamed at by her husband. He saw the scene, heard Ethan's accusations, and something inside him snapped. "You son of a bitch! You dare yell at my sister?" Jake roared. He dropped his backpack and launched himself at Ethan. He grabbed Ethan by the collar, and a single, powerful punch sent Ethan sprawling to the floor, his head cracking against the leg of the coffee table, blood pouring from his nose. Sharon shrieked like a banshee and threw herself onto the floor, flailing and screaming. "Murder! He's killing my son! Somebody call the police!" Jake was ready to hit him again, but Sarah's voice, cold and sharp, cut through the chaos. "Jake, stop!" She grabbed his arm. "Out in the kitchen, now!" She pulled her furious brother into the kitchen and slammed the door. "What is wrong with you? That coward has been bullying you for years." "Listen to me," Sarah said, her voice low and intense. "It's not what you think. Ethan is hiding a pregnant woman in the storeroom. She's on the run from the loan sharks who were just here. He's drained our entire savings, over $60,000, to pay for her." Jake stared, dumbfounded. "Then call the cops." "No," Sarah said. "If we call the police now, the money is gone forever. And that woman is pregnant. They can't do much to her. I have a plan, but I need you. I need you to be my protection, to sit here and make them scared. But you cannot touch him again. Do you understand?" Jake, seeing the steel in his sister's eyes, nodded grimly. "Tell me what to do." That afternoon, Jake sat menacingly in the living room, a silent guard dog. Ethan cowered in his bedroom upstairs. Sharon, terrified, slipped out to a pharmacy to buy more bandages for Jenna. The moment she was gone, Sarah acted. She had found a spare key to the padlock in Ethan's pants pocket earlier. She walked to the storeroom and unlocked it. The stench of sweat, sickness, and fear was overwhelming. In the dim light, she saw Jenna huddled in a corner, trembling, Don't hurt me, please. Don't turn me over to them, she whimpered. Sarah sat on an overturned bucket. Is the baby Ethan's? Is that why he spent $60,000 on you? Jenna burst into tears, shaking her head violently. No, the baby isn't his. The baby belongs to Manny, the loan shark. Then why? Why is Ethan doing this? Jenna's story came tumbling out in a torrent of sobs and whispers. Ethan is sterile, she choked out. He found out from a doctor months ago, but was too ashamed to tell you, or his mother. He met me at the bar, heard about my troubles with Manny, and he came up with a crazy plan. He said he'd pay off my debt and hide me, but in return, after the baby was born, I had to give it to him. He was going to tell you it was an orphan he was adopting, to make the family complete. It was all a lie to cover up the fact that he can't have children and to keep you tied to him, to keep you working and providing for him. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a debt. It was a monstrous, calculated conspiracy. All the years of her mother-in-law's taunts about being barren, all of Ethan's false sympathy. It was all a lie. They had planned to use her, to turn her into an unwitting caretaker for a loan shark's baby, just to protect a man's fragile ego. Jenna, seeing the look on Sarah's face, began to babble again, trying to save herself. But it wasn't his idea at first. He didn't mean for it to go this far. It was, suddenly, a new, more horrifying truth crashed down upon Sarah. She stood up, her face a mask of stone. You want to live? You want to have this baby safely? She said, her voice devoid of all emotion. Then you will stay in this room, and you will not say another word to anyone about what you just told me. If Ethan finds out that I know, I will personally open that front door and tell Manny exactly where to find you. Jenna nodded frantically, her hand clamped over her mouth. Sarah walked out, locked the door, and went straight to her brother. Jake, she said, her voice shaking with a rage so deep it was almost silent. We're going to the bank, right now. At the bank, Sarah withdrew every penny from her personal savings account, an account Ethan knew nothing about, and transferred it to Jake. That night, Ethan came to her, trying to play the part of the repentant husband, spinning a sob story about wanting to adopt a child to make their family whole. Sarah recorded every deceitful word. The final act came 2 nights later. In a desperate bid to salvage his collapsing career and secure a promotion that might bring in enough money to appease the loan sharks, Ethan invited his boss, a senior vice president named Mr. Thompson, over for an expensive steak dinner. He'd scrubbed the house and filled it with air freshener, trying to create an illusion of domestic bliss. The dinner was tense. Then, disaster struck. The storeroom door, which Sarah had discreetly unlatched earlier, burst open. Jenna, delirious with a raging infection from her untreated wounds, staggered out into the living room. She was a horrifying sight, filthy, bleeding, her face a skeletal mask of fever. Babbling incoherently about gangsters and money, she collapsed at Mr. Thompson's feet, grabbing his leg and begging him for help. Mr. Thompson, disgusted and appalled, kicked her away. What is this depravity? He roared at Ethan. You're harboring criminals in your home? You're fired. He stormed out, leaving Ethan's last hope in ruins. Ethan turned, his face contorted into a mask of pure evil, and saw Sarah watching him, a small, knowing smile on her face. You did this, he snarled, and lunged at her. He slapped her hard across the face, but the woman he hit was not the timid wife he had known. Fueled by years of suppressed rage, Sarah grabbed a heavy oak stool and swung it with all her might, connecting squarely with Ethan's shin. A sickening crack echoed through the room. Ethan screamed and collapsed, his leg broken. Ignoring his cries and Sharon's shrieks, Sarah calmly took out her phone and dialed 911. There's a pregnant woman here, she said into the phone. She has a severe infection and is bleeding. She's in critical condition. The arrival of the ambulance, its lights flashing and siren wailing, drew the entire neighborhood out of their homes. They watched in stunned silence as the filthy, moaning Jenna was carried out on a stretcher. The carefully constructed facade of the respectable family on the corner had been shattered forever. As the ambulance pulled away, Sarah, carrying her single duffel bag, walked out of the house without a backward glance and got into her car, following it to the hospital. At the hospital, after learning that Jenna and the baby would survive, Sarah confronted her one last time. Jenna, terrified of the police, confessed the final, ugliest piece of the puzzle. Ethan hadn't just taken advantage of her situation, he had created it. He had embezzled a huge sum of money from his company and, to cover his tracks, had tricked Jenna into taking out the massive loan from Manny in her name, using forged documents. He then took all the money, leaving her to face the loan shark's wrath. The baby wasn't an accident. Ethan had paid a desperate addict to impregnate her. He had engineered every last detail of her ruin to serve his own selfish needs. Sarah left the hospital, the full weight of his monstrosity settling upon her. This was not a man. This was a monster. The next morning, she and Jake loaded her personal belongings into a small U-Haul. As they were about to leave, Ethan, hobbling on crutches, appeared and tried to block their path, screaming that she was an adulteress, abandoning him in his time of need. Sarah simply looked at him, spit on the ground at his feet, and got into the truck. They drove away, leaving him screaming impotently in the middle of the street. On a bus bound for Wilmington, North Carolina, Sarah took out a cheap, untraceable burner phone. She composed a short, anonymous text to a number Jenna had given her. It was to Manny, the loan shark. "Looking for Jenna and your money? The man who has her, Ethan, will be at Queens General Hospital, maternity ward, 3rd floor, tonight at 8 p.m. to pay her bills." She pressed send. Then she snapped the SIM card in half and threw the pieces out the window into the night. The fallout was swift and brutal. Manny's crew found Ethan at the hospital, beat him until his ribs were broken, and forced him to sign over the deed to the house in Queens. A day later, the police, armed with evidence from his company's audit, arrested him for embezzlement and fraud. Sharon, evicted and abandoned by her daughter Cheryl, who wanted nothing to do with the mess, was left homeless. She called Sarah, begging her to sell her family's land in North Carolina to save Ethan. "You know, my husband once told me," Sarah replied calmly into the phone, "that if his mother was sick, I should get out and rent a room so she could have some peace. I think that's excellent advice." She hung up and blocked the number. 6 months later, the North Carolina sun shone down on a new business. S&J Lumber Supply. Sarah, in work boots and a dusty t-shirt, directed a forklift as it unloaded a shipment of fresh pine. Jake, covered in grease, was tuning up a customer's motorcycle in the garage they'd built next to the lumber yard. The air smelled of sawdust and salt from the nearby ocean. Sarah paused, looking at the life she had built from the ashes of her old one. A customer's invoice was in her hand, filled with numbers that represented her hard work, her independence, her survival. The storm was over. A new day had begun.